Welcome to another CMC podcast. Today, we're going to do our first ever Thanksgiving special podcast. So, joining us today, we've got John McKentley. John, could you say hi?
Hey, John McKentley here, former director of the CMC Rescue School and 47 years with the Montrose Search and Rescue Team, Los Angeles County, doing wilderness search and rescue.
Thanks, John. Wayne Chapman.
Hey, everybody. Happy holidays. Wayne Chapman, current director of CMC Rescue School.
Thanks, Wayne. Kelly Byrne.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Low-level schlub, CMC Rescue School.
Excellent. So one of the...
what about you?
My name's
Doug McElmurray. I'm also an instructor with the CMC Rescue School.
So one of the ways this podcast came about is we were kind of brainstorming on different things that we could actually do for a holiday special. And probably the most appropriate thing to do on Thanksgiving is to talk about what we are in fact thankful for. So as we were kind of doing a little pre-talk here, it's kind of a different subject, if you will, for rescuers to sit and talk about what they're thankful for, especially when it comes to something as specialized as technical rescue. But I think some things really stand out that's really shaped, where we're going and how we've gotten to where we are today. And for myself, I think the number one thing I'm thankful for is not only the testing, but the equipment that is out there now that makes the testing at the level we have possible. It started back in the older days. You had the big Dillon dynamometer. Kelly still has one that popped out of the class one day, I know. So it's kind of cool that some of that stuff is there. But now with like the new computerized load cells, there's just so much more data out there. And, you look back to some of the early days of the testing with the computerized load cells. I know at the early days of NADERS, Alpine Center for Rescue Studies, definitely had a lot of good information out there. Keith Schaefer from Salt Lake City did a really interesting study on, well, at that time we called them self-equalizing anchor systems. Now they're known as load distributing anchor systems, in large part due to his study. And then, a lot of other, names that were doing some of the early stuff, John Dill, Arner Larson, Rock Thompson, Reed Thorne, and that crew. So a lot of good stuff came from that. Thoughts?
Totally. It's interesting. Like I think the testing doesn't have to be high tech, but it's neat to have the ability to do it high tech with data logging and all of the devices that are able to do that. But you're right. Like, that old Dillon dynamometer still is, they're cheap and effective. Like you can buy them on eBay for, $75 or $100 and, just see what kind of numbers you're putting up. They're not you wouldn't be, trading, gold on them, but they're good enough to get you in the ballpark. And one thing that popped into my head when you were, talking about load cells, is just the technology that exists to build your own. Like I've built several load cells to test different things, and like it's cheap and the relatively effective, and the information on how to build them and how to calibrate them is all out there online. So like I'm thankful for that as well, and thankful for the ability to access the world's knowledge to be able to test that stuff and figure out how to do it. Like I don't know how to use that stuff. I've never calibrated a load cell before, but I know how now. So I think you're right. It's pretty cool. Like definitely the ability to, see the data in real time,
Well, and then if I could add for our listeners here that, Kelly has actually probably done some of the most advanced testing using load cells on like the Arizona Vortex and other things, and has been a presenter multiple times at IDERS. So his papers are all available out there, and he's really done some pretty innovative things with the not only how to position load cells and actually making and in his machine shop actually creating devices to use those load cells, which I think is just a convenient excuse to buy tools. But hey, I think we all need those. So
you're not wrong, but no, yes. Totally. But I was inspired by other people, Mike Forbes from Ropecraft, in Spokane Fire, like that, that guy turned me on to that stuff. I wouldn't have step the toe into that water if it weren't for people like him. But yeah, I mean, just, I saw a desire to test that stuff, and, I've got at least the will. I don't know if I got the capacity to figure it out all the way, but, at least to get halfway down that road to get rolling and test it. But yeah, I wanted to figure out like axial forces in the vortex. So yeah, put load cells in the legs. Got more plans for that too, by the way, but not mine. I'm helping a buddy out. But yeah, I mean, it's super cool to be able to do that and see that, and just have the ability to do that easily and cheaply, at a dirtbag level is kind of cool.
Well, I'm
Oh,
glad
and
Go
Doug,
ahead.
let me jump in on here. So with what Kelly is saying, he's got some valid points, right? So people do this quote backyard testing. And then what happens is you get these committees, be it ASTM, NFPA, et cetera, that sit down and say, hey, let's try to standardize a process of a particular test so that if somebody else wants to try it, these would be the parameters that you could use. So you would end up getting, similar results using, like materials, timeframes, speeds, et cetera. So I think it's a nice segue into the next part of this.
Yeah. And if you could, maybe talk, a little bit more about some of the standards process, especially kind of, maybe between you and John, you can talk about, kind of the Wild West days of before there was really, very well-defined testing. People could kind of do whatever they wanted. And then now,
and that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
So people just started testing, and then they would say, well, what did you do? And the guy wouldn't even have written it down. He says, well, I just did this. Then another guy says, well, hey, I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna write down what I did, how much rope, what knot did I use, measure things, speed of pull, all this stuff. And before you know it, more and more people are doing this. Standards come out. And then so when you get certain things, it's tested to a particular standard at a particular speed. All these things are documented so that we all are shooting from the same, sheet of music, if you will. We have a good starting point.
Yeah, it's interesting that it causes you to, I guess, learn how to think critically, when you look at those standards and just people writing it down and what they did. Because you can look at something somebody's done now and be like, oh man, that was way too fast of a pull or way too slow of a pull or something.
Or what weight did I use?
Sure. Yeah.
ASTM actually has a document on the types, the 5 types of weights and what they weigh and where those things come from. So when you do your testing, you can say, well, I use this weight because either NFPA uses it, the British Columbia Council of Technical Groups use Blake competency drop test, whatever it is, there's a standard load.
Well, and that's those standard loads, that standard that put those things together. I mean, it just defines a series of weights or this masses and says, this is where they came from because these groups used it, but it makes a difference. And when somebody does a presentation and they use some sort of other number, it causes you to think, you kind of go, okay, good stuff, but these things are out there. Why aren't you using the same load as somebody else? Is it because they just weren't aware of it? Or was there some other reason why they did it? Or maybe their weight, their test mass was the right one to use. There's a lot of discussion on those. And of course, that's one reason why the standards have that 5-year revision cycle. And some of those standard masses have been around a long time, and I don't see a lot of revising. But in the process of writing the standards, lots of times you sit, we always did our best to try to do manner of use tests rather than this is just a simple laboratory test. It's like this is the way it really might be used in the real world, and wrote some standards. And quite honestly, I can tell you that some of them were kind of junk when we turned around and gave them to people that weren't involved in the process and said, here, you do this and see if it makes sense to you. And let's see what really happens, because we found that some of the things that looked good on paper or sounded good in our brains turned out not to be so good when we finally got them done. But that's part of the process. That's the reason why I have so many people involved in the process and trying to, voting on a standard, if you will, or contributing to the writing of a standard is to try and get the best thing for everybody.
No doubt. I think it's a little overwhelming for most people, myself included, just to look at all the different standards bodies that are out there and then try and absorb it all. I mean, it's just it's mind numbing unless you've been doing it for 47 years or whatever you said. Like, I mean, you're like the human encyclopedia, John, of that stuff, and I'm thankful for that, that there's institutional knowledge from people
I'm
like
thankful
you.
I can remember your name. Come on. I mean,
I'm thankful you can too. It'd be embarrassing teaching class otherwise, but no, but that stuff's, I'm thankful there's people who care enough about the standards. I know Wayne's passionate as well. I'm not, like, I don't like that stuff is like, I don't know, like a Chinese encyclopedia. Like, I can't read it or make heads or tails of it, but I mean, it's overwhelming, but I'm glad there's people that can, that care about it, read it and distill it down. Like that's good for the common firefighter, I think.
Well, it's one of the things that came up today in one of the earlier broadcasts that'll probably come out after this one, when we were talking about these things. Be thankful that the standards that relate to equipment and the hardware that we're talking about are there really only a couple of standards bodies, and most of the standards are out there and well accepted. It comes down to training standards for things like dogs and horses. There's a lot more players out there with their own opinions and their quote standards. When you start to get a dozen people writing standards on how to use dogs for doing various things, then it's really not a standard anymore.
No.
And that's so much harder to deal with. And I was talking to somebody just today at lunch who was trying to deal with that. And it's like, which one do you pick and choose? And for a state agency or a local government that's trying to qualify various search and rescue people when it comes to training standards, and I cited using dog and horse type resources, but human resources probably come in the same way. It's a little more widespread and varied, and that's something that I hope we can get straightened out. There's just too many different ways to do it out there.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting too. You had mentioned like the evolution of some of these test methods and so on. I know there's a big move afoot with some people that want to see basically a 90-degree edge added into the belay competency drop test, because they're saying the vast majority of time there's an edge. Well, then, okay, well, what kind of an edge is it? Is it a hard edge?
That's the point,
sharp
right?
edge? Yeah.
You'd have to have the coefficient of friction, all this other stuff, because it has to be reproducible, right? I mean, it's one thing if you're going over, a granite phase. It's another thing if you're going over an ice phase. I mean, that I think that's why the standard doesn't have an edge, because obviously if it can pass without an edge, it can certainly pass with an edge.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and air's pretty standardized across North America, right? might be colder or warmer in different places, but it's still pretty much the same. So no, I definitely agree. It's interesting. Like, just thinking about it now, like I do not like reading standards, and they're just boring. But when you think about it, when you really think about it, like they do make life a little easier for everybody to try and select the gear or the training or the methods or whatever. Like that's not a bad thing.
And those standards aren't developed in a vacuum. I mean, they're
sure.
sat down, they're hashed out in committees with all sorts of people with varying backgrounds. So by the time the standard comes out, typically they've been, all this stuff's been thought through.
Sure. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah. Like it's I've never thought to been thankful for standards before, but like, I guess I am ultimately. That's pretty cool.
And I think it's kind of cool too, how some of the standards can even be used to test, like, not product testing per se, but maybe the one that always comes to mind for me is the one that I think was Jim Kovach did from Fairview Park Fire Department that we use in the Don't Blank on My Rope, with the don't step on a rope or don't drive over a rope. And he kind of used a standardized test method, which lends a lot of credibility to the testing that was done.
Yep.
Absolutely. I find some of that, kind of the challenging the myth kind of things really intriguing.
Look at the test that Garen Wallace did from SMC when he was throwing the carabiners off the tower. I mean, he actually documented how high the tower was. Or they hit on concrete, they hit on asphalt. Anybody go out now and reproduce that test because some basic parameters.
And how that came from was testing that we'd done on our rescue team. To a lesser extent, we didn't have the wide availability of samples to drop that Garen had at SMC, but he went to our rope rescue class, and I told the story about us dropping carabiners, and he picked up on it and carried it further. So lots of times there's 2 or 3 or 4 iterations of people refining the testing and the presentation that just makes it better or more inclusive for everybody.
Yeah, and some, I mean, you were talking like 30 plus years of testing. I mean, you look at some of like the original work that John Dill did with his testing with are you really on belay? That's still kind of the foundational document that everyone has built off of. Whether it be Reed, Tom Penley, and all these other people that have done really interesting, in some cases controversial belay device or belay methodology testing.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It leads into, one of the things I was thankful for, pregame in this, was just the ability to, share ideas now rather than, finding somebody's tattered copy of an old magazine or whatever of where this testing had occurred. With the internet and the ITER's website and all kinds of stuff that that has the information to be shared. But like, where is the repository for all this information? Like I don't know, where's the
there is no, you're right. There is no standardized.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Place.
That would be cool. I know, I think Tom Evans has come close to that with his website, the SAR Cubed website. Like he's got a lot of stuff documented on there from various places, but there is no, one big library of all this stuff. Cause where do you find a copy of Are You Really on Belay? I guess you'd have to search it on the internet, but I mean, there's no place you can go to easily and be like, aha, like I need to go to the B's for belay section and, pull this book out. So,
right.
For all the idea sharing and knowledge sharing that's out there, I don't think that there's a great repository for it yet. So, and I'm thankful for the person who's going to come up with that. It ain't going to be me.
But right now, if you need that information, go to Kelly. He has it in his basement.
Probably I'm in the command center right now. I got a lot.
That's a really good point, because what we're seeing here is a generational change. A lot of the pioneers, names that we've mentioned and names we probably will mention still, that are either no longer with us or becoming less involved. And so there's a lot of institutional memory on the part of some people that probably won't be around to share it very much longer. And that's something that's really important to figure out where it can go and be housed. And I know that the cloud's out there and there's a lot of information, but searching through it sometimes makes it hard to find, and it's just so important that we take advantage of the people while we can to get that stuff filed away somewhere and most of all accessible to other people.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, it's interesting being a younger guy with CMC and, talking to people who've been to, every NADERS and ITERS since the beginning. And, or, I don't know, like there's a lot of knowledge out there and you just look and like, Jesus Christ, how am I ever going to catch up with that?
Yeah.
And it's hard. Yeah. But there is no repository. You just got to pay attention, write it down and, take a bunch of pictures, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and kind of the pre-talk here, John, I think brought up a very valid point, the importance of getting, trying to glean that information out of these people so you don't repeat things that we already know. So instead of repeating, we can build on it. How many people are come up with an idea of testing that's been already tested, 3, 4, 5 times.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's always the ITER's joke about Prussics, because 1 year or 2 years or a series of years, that was there were so many of those things. And that's why I think it would be so important that people that are doing research and they're interested, one, don't have to reinvent the wheel and can make the wheel better by not reinventing it. They can take their time and their effort and their money or whatever and put it towards something new rather than trying to tell us what we already know or what we think we know. And it's okay. Sometimes things change, but a lot of it is unfortunately, it's just wasted time and effort, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. It's still fun to see it though, and just see what people's brains were thinking, I guess, even if it's already been done to death and
Yeah,
they've never been.
That's where an old repository would be cool, right? If everything was in one place, and there's just no way it'll ever be that way, but if everything were in one place, you could say, you know what, I'm going to go in here and I've got a particular interest in this subject. Click on it, open it up and say, I'm going to do this again 30 years later and see what happens now with the gear we have today.
Well, and things do change. And that's one of the things that we did with the knot testing. It's kind of, I always make the joke about on rope and Vines and Hudson's high angle rescue techniques and CMC rope rescue manual and these things that all have knot strengths and things like that. And I don't know who did them first because they all cite each other. It's kind of a group thing, and we've kind of followed all the same people's testing and the same people's numbers. Well, we went in there and we started doing them under a standard with multiple rope samples, all with the same rope, that multiple times and not just once, and things like that. But look at the differences. If you look at rope standards as the rope has changed, we find that the knots behave differently and all sorts of other things, with the material and construction changes. And those are continually evolving. So some of those tests really need to be done again to say, with the newer types of construction of rope, to make sure that the numbers that we are citing are still valid. And we were very, very surprised when we found that a figure eight bend didn't behave like all the rest of the figure eights with that 20% strength loss or 80% efficiently or 75% efficiency, whatever number you want to choose. We found that it was radically different with the bend versus the loop knots. And it varied between the types of materials that we used and just things that we found internally and that we've shared. But there is a reason to go back and look at what was done and do them over again as things change. We've seen so many changes to rope in the last 40 or 50 years that construction and materials and everything like that you continually have to look at these things.
Yeah, it kind of comes full circle to what Doug was talking about, though, and just the availability of being able to test that stuff yourself now to a pretty high degree of accuracy.
Sure.
With load cells and data logging and all that stuff, which it's pretty neat to be able to do that. And I mean, I did that with a bunch of different bowlines. I was curious about a bunch of different bowline variations. Like, got a ton of rope and big pull test sled and went to town on it. So it's pretty cool that just your average Joe can do that if they want to. So very cool.
Doug, something I just thought about was talking about things to be thankful of. How about being thankful to all the manufacturers that donate rope, etc., gear to these people so they can do their backyard testing? Because without that, none of this stuff occurs.
No, you're definitely right. I know, CMC is good about it. PMI, Sterling, like I did, everybody. Yeah, you call and as long as you got a halfway decent proposal, that everybody's usually pretty generous with making it happen. I went to a local shop that makes heavy rigging slings and chains, for tow trucks, and they love the fire department. They're like, yeah, come on, like we'll turn you loose on our $100,000 machine or whatever it is. Like, go nuts. Like, here, press this button and have at it, kid. Like, okay. So yeah, it is. I mean, you just got to ask. I think if you got an idea, you figure out a way to test it and just ask. Like, it's pretty cool.
But even the innovation, I mean, like you had mentioned Mike Forbes earlier. I mean, he came up with his own pull test machine that you can make, and he has plans, everything for it.
Yeah,
very
totally.
Cool. Yeah.
It is like, I think he wanted to build it for a certain dollar amount and build it in your backyard. And I mean, to a pretty high degree of accuracy too. Like that's, on my list of things to, hide from my wife, but of course it's a pull test. Exactly.
I'd like to see that list sometime. Of course, so would she, I guess.
Yeah. Probably. There's only one thing on it. It's not a big deal, but yeah, of course it's a log splitter. Come on. I know we don't have a fireplace, but yeah, what the heck?
Well, I can remember a story. I think it was out of the Alpine Center for Rescue Studies when they were building a new house. They actually had a drop test tower and they had to convince the bank that it was a dumbwaiter. But it was actually a drop test tower within the house. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. All right.
Yeah.
Let me write that down. So noted. I'm definitely down for it. No, I mean that's creative ways of getting what you want. Like somebody was your spark of an idea to help you, get what you wanted done.
There you go. So
on that subject, and something that you mentioned earlier, Doug, Jim Kovac had that backyard swing set that he assembled, happened to be 20 foot tall and, made out of wide flange beams and everything, but we haven't seen him lately. I wonder if that's still out there, and, maybe he'll want to unload it on somebody, a way to get some used equipment or another big giant drop tower,
Yeah, there you go. I think Rock Thompson had an old section of Highline mast in his backyard. I know that got used for testing for one of their probably several of the international rope science workshops.
Nice.
I can imagine the neighbors were probably real thrilled about all these tech rescue geeks hanging out in the backyard to the wee hours of the night, drinking beer and dropping 600-pound loads on different devices.
That wasn't a ham radio antenna.
There you go. Just the most stable one in the entire West. Yeah.
Perhaps. I mean, you can never be too careful.
There you go.
No, Doug, I know you had mentioned, just being thankful for mentors and people, who've inspired or helped you along the way. Who did you have listed for that?
Well, actually two early ones. Before I was even involved in rescue, I was rock climbing, and I found the Royal Robbins books, basic rockcraft and advanced rockcraft, and then it was kind of cool. I had the opportunity to meet him and talk to him a couple of times. That was probably one of my earliest things that I thought really shaped kind of where I was going to go with rope. And then in the early 80s, when I became a dealer for CMC, Jim Frank is just impressed the living heck out of me. And I would say he's definitely was a mentor the things I learned from him, not only in the rope business, but just how to deal with people and all that shaped my entire professional life.
That's super cool on both counts. Wayne, what about you? Who were your guys?
An early guy for me, John probably knows him, was Mike McGroarty.
There you go. Yep.
Mike took me under his wing. Man, I can't even. 1990. Mike, for the listeners, ended up becoming the fire chief of the La Habra Fire Department of Southern California. La Habra was absorbed by LA County. Mike then went to work on for the California Office of Emergency Services. Mike was he's somebody I hold in high regard. Obviously, present company, John McCanley, Bruce Parker, a lot of the people, Pat Rhodes, a lot of people that took me under the wing along the way. But Mike would have to be probably the one guy that really saw something in me and helped develop me.
Super cool.
Kelly, how about you?
I've got three, and they're all local guys who are not on the national stage. They're not in the business, but I'll name drop it anyways. The first would be my lieutenant when I got to the rescue squad in Washington, D.C. He retired as a deputy chief, but Rob Callahan's his name, and that guy, along with my driver, who was named Mike Shea, gave me my love for a deep understanding of rope. Like my driver was a physics major in college, and he didn't spring that on me for a couple of months. I'm like, man, how does this dude know so much about these forces? And but he's the one who gave me the understanding, and in both of those guys, the love for the way the world around me works. So those two were hugely influential. And then the third was my partner in crime, Tim Dowd, who we went to rookie school together, were appointed to the same firehouse together, and worked in the back of the rescue squad for a long, long time together. But just that journey of discovery of the way, the way of learning and the way of looking at the world, was hugely shaped by him as well. So those are my three on a local level. Certainly on the grander scale, it's all the names people have mentioned. The usual big names, but those three definitely huge influence on me.
Excellent. Yeah. And John, I'm really curious to hear John's because, he's got more access, has had more access to a lot of these big names than any of us have had. So I'm really curious to see who you thought
Well,
were some of your greatest mentors.
obviously the people that, I kind of started some of this stuff in the Boy Scouts and had some manuals and things like that before I got involved in on the rescue team. But the kind of on the line of Kelly, the guys on my rescue team on Montrose Search and Rescue that first trained me for the rescue systems and things like that. Obviously, the hiking and climbing part was different, but those guys were my first major influence. But then when I started to get into a little wider scale out of the county sort of thing, obviously Jim Frank, because we were on sister teams, would see each other on Mountain Rescue Association events and meetings and things like that. But the other one is Steve Hudson from PMI. And maybe it's because Jim and Steve and I were all the same age or something like that. But Steve was very, very influential as far as getting, during his time on the NASAR board, getting ASTM involved in the process of standards. That was something that came about. He was on the board saying, hey, NASAR was trying to put standards together. And he said, look, why don't you go to this organization because they do it all the time. They'll make sure the standards are good. They have the process in place and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And obviously we became good friends because we worked together on ASTM and NFPA standards committees and NADERs and then into IDERs and things like that. But trying to make it good for everybody. I mean, in a way we were competitors, but we were all friends. And his view was for the best for the business. He wasn't a wilderness rescuer so much as I was, as he was a caver, and I don't classify myself as a caver at all. But same stuff underground and in the dark, so it's a lot harder. And I have great respect for those people that I really learned as we worked together on various standards committees. So Steve's name definitely has to be up there, and there are certainly others that we may not all know as personally, but were very influential in this. And not to discount anybody, but definitely Jim and Steve.
Yeah, and I think too the different backgrounds between Jim and Steve really made those two powerhouses, especially when they worked together on things with the caving and the climbing background, and kind of in that same light too. In one of Steve's co-authors of his book with Tom Vines.
Totally, yeah. Those I never met. I might have met Tom Vines once. He came to IDERS a couple years ago, I think. But
been a long time. But he was definitely, we'll have to do a whole podcast on IDERS. But he was one of those people right at the beginning of trying to put it together. And again, as a wilderness rescuer and author and things like that from Montana.
And John Dill, and for those that don't know, he was the head rescue ranger in Yosemite.
Still there.
Yeah.
Still there.
And just the innovative things the guy came up with. And sometimes it was such simple little things, the little pill bottle system with the weights where they would throw out of the helicopter at the climber to be able to lift them off. And, he had like a bandolier made up with all these little pill bottles with the cordage in there. It was just fascinating. It's just fascinating to sit and listen and try to attempt to understand the thought process that went into such innovative thinking.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole context outside of my world, but it's neat to just see the process. Why'd you choose that? Maybe it helped me choose something in the urban setting. I don't know, super cool.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that all these names that we've kind of brought up, and by no means is this an all-inclusive list. I think, John, you said it right. There's so many other names that we haven't talked about. But in each of these cases, I think one common trait that they have is they're willing to sit down and talk with people and answer questions. And no matter, I guess I look at some of the questions that I've asked some of these people in retrospect, like, God, it was really a stupid question, but they humored me. They took the time and they would answer it, and without making you feel like an idiot. And I think those are just very good traits to try to mimic and to carry on, you know?
Yeah, most definitely. Like it's definitely an approachable bunch, just as as Wayne mentioned, the manufacturers are approachable. I think most everybody in this business wants to see it, or not even business, just the field of rescue wants to see it continue to, progress and, progress in a good manner and as safe as it needs to be. And, just pass it on and hope the next generation learns the lessons that you've been able to, acquire and hopefully pass on. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. So excellent. So why don't we kind of looking at the time here, and it looks like we're getting pretty far into this thing here, and especially for a holiday podcast. So maybe we can kind of go down the list here. Kelly, anything else you kind of want to wrap us up with of what you're thankful for?
No, I think the three biggies that we hit, the ability to test stuff, the ability to share stuff, and the ability to learn from, people who came before you, and the people who are coming after you, just pass it along. I think those are nothing other than those. Like that's a pretty awesome grouping of ideas right there that we could probably talk about any one of them. But no, those hit it up.
Yeah, thanks. Wayne.
I've kind of already said my piece as far as what I'm thankful for, but I would like to on this Thanksgiving thank all the fire, police, EMS, nurses, doctors, hospital staff, support staff, our military station around the world, grocery store workers, everybody who's working. Thank you for what you're doing, especially in this difficult time we live in right now.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. John.
Well, this is a touchy-feely time, huh?
Yeah.
Well, aside from being thankful for all you guys and the rest of the people that have supported me for my many years, I'm thankful that I'm still here. I'm thankful that we're continuing to save lives. I'm thankful that because of all the work that we've all collectively been doing, that we're keeping rescuers safer, and we're probably able to assist the general public out of their dilemmas more easily, quicker, faster, safer, and everything like that. So I'm thankful that we're all here, that we've been able to do it, and that hopefully we'll continue to do it for a long time.
Very well said. And I'll just top it off. I'm thankful for being able to do this podcast and to work with all of you guys. I learn from each of you every time, along with all of our other instructors and other people in the business. And I just really appreciate it. And I appreciate that we have this format that we can try to get some information and at least hopefully motivate people to go out and ask why. I think Leroy said in one of the previous podcasts, we should always ask why. And I think very good advice from him. And as Wayne has mentioned multiple times, if you, the listeners, have got something that you want to hear us discuss, or either whether it be a hot topic, a controversial topic, or just something that is you would find interesting, by all means, please email us at the podcast email at cmcpro.com, or cmcpro.com. So unless anyone else has anything, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a safe Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
All right. Take care.